In the woodlands of northern Europe, there lies a disk composed of countless concrete slabs, the largest memorial of its kind in the galaxy. On its surface has been inlaid the names of every Terran who perished in the First Contact War and the years of struggle that followed. Before the arrival of the Tyrum, this site was known as Berlin, until on February 17, 2090, a flash of light erased the city from existence, sparking the beginning of a terrible slaughter of mankind and the birth of the Greater Terran Union. Today, that nation spans the whole of Earth and countless other planets, but it was born in that instant, in what was once called the Old World, and what is now known as the European Commissariat. While Europe would be the first to suffer the orbital strikes of the Tyrum, it proved remarkably resistant. For nearly 60 years, much of the continent had been united under the sovereignty of the European Federation, and the continent's evolution from a fragmented collection of nation-states to integrated superpower was uniquely suited to survive external invasion. The European Federation suffered from the same cataclysmic damage to its civilian government that affected other nations, but its armed forces remained decentralized and impossible to cripple in a single decapitating strike. Still largely divided between various regional commands, whose authority was aligned to the territories of its former member nations, the Eurocorps had a disproportionate number of command and control centers. While criticized as top-heavy prior to the war, this level of redundancy allowed European forces to remain organized even as the Tyrum landed ground forces and losses escalated exponentially. The fall of German, Belgium, and Czech states in the first few years of the conflict threatened to split the Federation in two and effectively erase the nation's remaining federal civilian leadership. With communications increasingly difficult to maintain and a vast coordinated counteroffensive impossible, military authority was further decentralized. Federation military doctrine had always emphasized freedom of action, and the scattered remnants of the European armed forces transformed themselves into a loose coalition of battle groups, all capable of acting independently and without support if necessary. The size and disposition of remaining Eurocorps forces varied wildly. In some cases, they were little more than scattered battalions garrisoning small villages and towns, ensuring lines of communication were kept open for as long as possible. In others, entire army groups took control of enormous territories, integrating themselves into local governments and creating emergency military administrations. Echoing the description once given to Prussia, the European coalition was not so much a state with an army, but an army with a state, scattered and disorganized though they might be. These efforts were not always successful. The fragmentation of the European military created overlapping areas of assumed responsibility and confusion at times as to who was in overall command. In the worldwide effort against the Tyrum, however, this was hardly unique, and more than any other theater of war, the Eurocorps coalition proved most capable of leveraging regional infrastructure, mobilizing available resources, and maintaining a continuity of regional governments. Faced with an increasingly deteriorating situation, the Eurocorps had no choice but to adapt on the fly. Impromptu battle groups were created, merged, split, and lost at a rapid rate, and many commanders had no orders other than to follow their own judgment. But as makeshift solutions began to reverse the collapse of worldwide communications, it was discovered that the Eurocorps' strategy had been unusually effective. Entire areas of the continent cut off by the Tyrum and assumed to have fallen had not only survived, but in some cases had been transformed into highly organized enclaves of resistance. The improvised command structure of the European coalition made the integration of foreign elements easier than it otherwise might have been. Surviving battle groups from the Middle East, Eurasia, Africa, and even the North American Commonwealth, once located, were quickly subsumed into the growing coalition command structure. In place of a rigid hierarchy, a loose council of high-ranking officers, first solely from within the Federation, but increasingly from foreign nations as the war progressed, created broad objectives and directed strategy. The legendary Franco-German counterattack along the Western European front, the unexpected arrival of the Polish armoured division during the siege of Dresden, and the joint Italian-Spanish landing in Algiers cemented the European coalition as the most effective military force on the planet. As Europe was liberated, its increasingly organised forces were deployed to ever-distant battlefields, even assisting in the Battle of New England in the final months of the war. Now a firmly international coalition, the transformed Eurocorps became a key partner and power broker worldwide. As various post-war factions competed for dominance in North America, Africa, and Asia, coalition support was often a deciding factor. Much of the world followed the European model, bringing to the coalition increased legitimacy, recognition, and support. By the time the coalition was formally recognized as the world's single provisional government, the influence of the old Eurocorps had been dramatically reduced as American, Eurasian, Pan-Pacific, and Asian commands were integrated. Even so, the lineage of the Eurocorps could still be felt, and it was a point of pride that the remnants of the European Federation were the first to cede formally their sovereignty to the coalition, and would thereafter ratify the Greater Terran Union in Europe, with a sizable majority. The division of old Federation territories across newly established Union commissariats was unpopular, but accepted by most as the natural conclusion to European imperialism. The erasure of European sovereignty was also resisted, but often portrayed in state media at the time as a fitting evolution of the European Federation. In a controversial address amidst Reconstruction, Marshal Cosma Orlik declared that, as much as Europe has joined the world has joined Europe. While criticized as Eurocentric and divisive at a time emphasizing global unity, it cannot be discounted entirely. Both the European Commissariat and the Greater Terran Union are similar in many ways to the European Federation, with the latter being closely studied during the integration period. The government of the European Commissariat is largely identical to that of other terrestrial commissariats, with slight deviations in procedure and custom according to local traditions. Its three branches of government are likewise modelled on that of the Greater Terran Union. Federal authority is held by the Office of the High Commissar, while legislative and judicial power is administered by the Council of Europe and the High Court of Europe respectively. Its capital is located in the city of Strasbourg, but with major offices and ministries spread across the whole of the commissariat. Rather than directly competing with larger commissariats, the European economy is highly diversified, with a slight emphasis in the advanced tech sector and automated systems. Luxury products from Europe are highly prized, especially in the frontier systems of the Union, as much for their quality as the history associated with it. European shipbuilding, while incapable of the same scale of production as the Eurasian or Pan-Pacific commissariats, has produced several prototypes eventually adopted into widespread service. The European Commissariat maintains no independent defense forces, but instead operates numerous paramilitary organizations and a single ceremonial division which garrisons government buildings and sites of historic significance. This unit is known by the Eurocorps honorific and is composed entirely of Land Force Command veterans who have completed an infamously grueling application process. The division has been deployed only once in its history, when human supremacists converged on the Marcel Godin spaceport in an attempt to block and harass some of the first Florian refugees to arrive on Earth. Footage of a Eurocorps soldier knocking out a human supremacist who attempted to grab a Florian child earned the unit widespread recognition and popularity across the whole of the Union. While the remarks of the unit's commander, future High Marshal Erich Koenig, became a rallying call of the Pan-Terran movement, saying, "The GTU has no patience for this bullshit." The Eurocorps is the most visible reminder of the European Federation, but its legacy, and the legacy of every nation ever to raise their banners across the continent, can still be felt. When the Tyrum came to Earth on February 17, 2090, it had been nearly a lifetime since Europe had known a major war. None alive then could remember their cities reduced to rubble and their skies clogged by falling ash. But it was something the continent itself knew well, and something it had overcome, again and again and again. When Europe's army struck back against the Tyrum, they charged against annihilation like the Knights of Charlemagne. When Europe's explorers joined the great effort to explore the stars, they did so with the confidence of Bartholomew Diaz and Samuel de Champlain. When Europe's descendants faced annihilation on distant worlds, they held steadfast like Roman legions. Today, when a citizen of the Greater Terran Union, regardless of their species, tier, or creed, seeks inspiration, they can find uncounted acts of selflessness, uncounted acts of heroism, uncounted acts of justice, wisdom, creativity, and commitment within the history of the European Commissariat.
The Ministry of Public Enlightenment is proud to announce that to celebrate the upcoming anniversary of our Greater Terran Union, several new products have been made available to all citizens, regardless of tier. The state banners of Air, Fleet, and Land Force Command can now be found on the Templin Commissary, as well as a GTU-branded shower curtain, a stern reminder of your water ration limit. Use the offer code HIGHMARSHAL to get 15% off your purchase for the next 30 days. You'll find the links in the description.